My name is Courtney Klein, and this is my presentation on how public libraries serve child patrons with developmental disabilities. So what does having a developmental disability mean? A simple definition is an intellectual impairment occurring before adulthood that will continue across the lifespan. The legal and more specific definition is given by the Developmental Disabilities Act, Section 102, which specifies that the person must have had the disability manifest before they turn 22, continue for the rest of their lives, and affect three major life activities which they list. Developmental disabilities include the autism spectrum disorders, cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, mental retardation, and Fragile X syndrome. Next, I want to talk about the historical experiences of people with developmental disabilities. People with DD have a history of being ill-treated by main society. They were often labeled as deviants, jesters, fools, and were cast out by society. With the rise of institutions came poor institution conditions, which looked neglectful and abusive as they were overcrowded. This was a very dehumanizing period for people with disabilities. It's not until the 1960s we see a positive shift with the parents' movement, which occurred in parallel with the civil rights movement. And this era granted people with disabilities their equal rights, and the notion towards treating them with dignity and respect started. Which leads us to the current day thought and culture surrounding persons with disabilities. The first issue facing this population today is that of isolation, whether that comes from stigmatization from the general public, immobility due to physical stature, or lack of resources in the area. Experts and loved ones in the field really advocate for inclusion, independence, opportunity, and self-advocacy. There are programs today that are wonderful and support the creativity, vocational, and recreational interest of this population. There's been a great deal of awareness outreach to the public and early intervention efforts for children with DD. So why is it so important for librarians to know this? Well, the librarian role is a social role in which they are understanding how to help people reach their information needs, and understanding how to communicate with the population and its struggles and triumphs will keep librarians informed and make them more multiculturally sensitive and empathetic towards the people they are serving. I really admire this quote from Robert M. Hensel, an individual with a disability who once said, "I don't have a disability, I have a different ability." It's really important for librarians to remember this in their social role, that people with disabilities should not be treated as though they are inferior, they are sad, they are helpless, or they are crazy. It is important to treat people with disabilities in a respectable manner and to not assume that they cannot perform tasks and need a lot of help. It is good to ask and then accommodate as needed. So how do and can libraries play a role for the youth with developmental disabilities? The proverb, "It takes a village to raise a child," really runs deep here. The caregivers and families of children with developmental disabilities really need their village, because although people with disabilities is a growing population, it still is on the fringes. And the library is a great place that can provide support through community inclusion, early childhood intervention, provide a safe place for learning, and promote community awareness. The library is not only a free place, but it is also a public place and can really serve as the connection that these folks have with mainstream society. There has been legislation made on behalf of persons with disabilities, and this goes into the public library setting. The American Disability Act of 1990 has an excerpt which reads, "The public library is required by law to provide access for children with special needs to attend programs." The Architectural Barriers Act of 1968 and the Rehabilitation Act of 1963 requires that persons with disabilities must have access to the building itself and to programs and public facilities paid for by federal funds. There are many public libraries that are pioneering the movement for children with DD, such as the Brooklyn Public Library, the Oceanside Library in New York, the Ferguson Library in Stamford, Connecticut, and the National Library Service for the Blind and Physically Handicapped. The one that struck me as the most inspiring was the Brooklyn Public Library space, called the Child's Place for Children with Special Needs, which has 4 different programs to suit varying personalities and needs, such as gardening, socializing, story time, and more. They also have materials for vision impairment, disabilities, and they even encourage teen volunteers to help the librarian facilitate the program, regardless of disability. So, how should librarians prepare to serve this youthful population? Well, they can be aware of physical space, such as, is this area easily maneuverable for a person in a wheelchair? They can also provide big books for learners with attention deficit disabilities. There are digital materials that are out there that convert text to speech, and so forth. Librarians can also do social outreach, attend sensitivity training, form parent alliances, and develop appropriate curriculum ideas by utilizing special education resources. Here is some librarian to librarian advice from Antoinette D'Orazio. She says, keep the group small, allow parents to decide which program their child will thrive in, provide big books, involve the children as much as possible, and try not to turn anyone away, regardless of disability or no disability. Thank you for listening to my presentation.